The Verith do not fear the dark between stars. We mapped it. We assigned it designations, density coefficients, probability matrices for anomalous mass concentration. Every surveyor who sits a sensor post on a deep boundary vessel is trained to understand that uncertainty is not a condition of the universe. It is a condition of insufficient data. You gather more data, and the universe resolves into precision. That is what we do. That is what I believed in the 31st cycle of my first deployment, when the contact signature appeared at the edge of my board and declined to resolve into anything my instruments understood. My designation is Verith Survey Auxiliary 2nd Grade Aerithsorn Caliph. I was posted to the Survey Vessel Precise Enumeration, assigned to boundary cartography along the corridor between the Ashen Pair, two dead stellar remnants at the outer reach of the Exactorate's charted territory. The corridor was listed in our records as transit inhospitable. Dense debris from the remnants' ancient collapse, background radiation elevated, navigational complexity rated at 7.4 on a 10-point scale. Nothing lived there. Nothing transited there. The corridor was logged, categorized, and filed as a data-rich null zone. I had been running passive sweeps for 6 consecutive shifts. Standard cartographic work. The precise enumeration held position at the corridor's near edge, her arrays drinking in the background scatter, her processors converting it into decimal precision. My supervisor, 3rd Analyst Marith Voss, had gone to her rest cycle 2 hours prior. I was alone at the primary sensor post, which was, in survey work, entirely ordinary. The contact signature appeared at 0312 ship time. It did not read as a vessel. My board classified it first as a debris cluster, consistent with the corridor's profile. I noted it, tagged it for secondary analysis, and continued my sweep. But the cluster did not behave as debris. It held a consistent vector. The mass index was coherent in a way the natural object, even a large one, simply isn't. I refined my sweep. I ran a comparative poll against the Exactorate's full debris behavior library, 47,000 logged objects. No match. I flagged it as anomalous and widened my aperture. What I saw did not fit any category my instruments possessed. The object, I was still calling an object, was emerging from the deep corridor. It moved without the microvariance that drift physics imposes on passive mass. It moved with intention. It was enormous. My mass return suggested something in the range of 4.2 million metric tons. For reference, the precise enumeration masses at 68,000. I ran the figure twice, then a third time. It did not change. I woke Marith Voss. She came to the post still adjusting her visual receptors, emergency protocol amber catching the angular planes of her face. She looked at my board. She said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, very precisely, that reading is in error. I have run it 11 times, I told her. Run it again. I did. 4.2 million metric tons. Moving at a deliberate, controlled velocity. Decelerating, I now understood. It had been decelerating for some time, the thrust signature so faint I had initially classified it as background radiation. Efficient. Extraordinarily efficient. Marith Voss sent the contact packet to the captain without another word to me. By the time the captain arrived on the survey deck, I had determined 3 additional facts. First, the object was a vessel. Its geometry, when I enhanced the resolution, was clearly constructed, not grown, not aggregated, but engineered. Flat planes, structural symmetry, arrays of some kind along its ventral surface. Second, it was broadcasting. Not on any frequency the Exactorate uses, but the patterns were unmistakable, modulated, rhythmic, obviously intentional. Third, it was alone. In a corridor rated as transit inhospitable, a single vessel massing at 4.2 million metric tons had made the crossing without apparent support, without escort, and had arrived broadcasting as though it had expected to find someone waiting. The captain ordered us to full passive silence. We went dark, no active emissions, nothing that could betray our position. We held. We watched it for 4 hours. In those 4 hours, I did what a survey auxiliary does. I gathered data. The vessel's hull, at maximum resolution, was extraordinary. It was not smooth. It had been used. Panel lines ran its entire length. Weld seams visible at my sensor's edge of discrimination. The surface carried the texture of something that had been repaired and modified and repaired again over a very long service life. What I had first taken for weapons arrays, I could now see were something more complex. A mixture of obvious defensive emplacements, sensor installations, and structures whose purpose I could not identify at all. The vessel's geometry was roughly planar, with a broad central hull that split into ventral and dorsal extensions near its stern. Not elegant, not optimized by the Exactorate's engineering standards. Built for endurance. I found myself running out of comparatives. Merith Voss, who had been standing beside me in silence, said quietly, "Where did it come from?" I checked my corridor charts. The vessel's approach vector, traced back through the debris field, terminated in the deep void beyond the Ashen Pair. The unmapped region the Exactorate's survey boundary stopped short of, rated as theoretically transit and hospitable at 10.0. The corridor itself was rated 7.4, and we sat at its edge as a matter of professional caution. Something had crossed the 10.0 void and arrived at our border, then crossed our border's hardest corridor, and stopped. I cannot determine origin from this data, I told her, which was true. It was also, for a Verith sensor analyst trained to believe that sufficient data resolves all uncertainty, an admission of a kind I had never made before. In the fifth hour, the captain made a decision. We went active. A single narrow-band emissions pulse, the Exactorate's standard boundary contact protocol, short enough that it committed nothing, formal enough that it communicated intent. We had used the protocol exactly once in documented history, when two survey vessels from different Exactorate branches encountered each other in an overlapping grid. It was a formality, a bureaucratic artifact. The vessel responded in 47 seconds, not on our frequency, on its own broadcast frequency, which it had been transmitting on for 5 hours. But the pattern shifted. It had been cycling the same sequences. Now it added new structures around them. The sequences continued, but surrounded by new layering, as though it had heard us and incorporated our signal into its own as a point of reference. Merith Voss looked at me. I had no analysis to offer. I had data without a framework to put it in. We held position for another 3 hours. The vessel did not advance. It did not retreat. It maintained its broadcast, now structured around that single contact pulse of ours, and it waited with a patience that I found and find difficult to articulate, almost methodical. It was not the patience of something that had stopped. It was the patience of something that expected this to take a while and had planned accordingly. At hour 8, the captain transmitted our full standard contact packet, species identification, Exactorate designation, territorial notation. The entire formal apparatus. The vessel acknowledged in 11 seconds. What it sent back was a translation key. Not a full language. That would have been impossible so quickly, but a structured mathematical scaffold, clearly designed to begin building one. The sophistication of it, even to my limited linguistics training, was evident. This was not a first attempt. This was a protocol. They had done this before. The captain ordered us to hold position and transmitted a priority burst to the Exactorate's nearest relay station. The estimated round-trip response time was 62 hours. We were the only Verith vessel within sensor range. We had encountered something that crossed a void our charts rated as impassable, massing 60 times more than anything in our survey fleet, and it had responded to our contact protocol with a prepared translation scaffold and the operational patience to sit in a debris corridor and wait for 62 hours, if that was what the conversation required. I did not sleep in the rest cycle that followed. I sat at my post and watched the vessel on passive sensors and ran through everything I had been trained to know about the universe. It was not, I concluded, that my training was wrong. The data was accurate. The readings were sound. What was wrong was the assumption, the one we had never examined because it had never needed examining. The assumption that the unmapped void was empty because nothing had crossed it, because nothing could. The vessel's name, according to the translation scaffold it provided, was IHS Boundless Meridian. The letters IHS, the scaffold indicated, stood for an interstellar designation of its civilization's origin, a species called, in their own rendering, humans. Meridian. I looked the mathematical root up in comparative linguistic structures, found the closest Verith conceptual analog. It meant the line across the middle of everything, the point from which all measurements are taken. I thought about a species that named a ship Boundless Meridian and sent it alone into a void their neighbors thought was impassable. I thought about the patience in those 8 hours of broadcast. I thought about what a vessel built for endurance, scarred from long service, broadcasting with prepared protocols and a ready translation scaffold, meant about the civilization behind it. Then I updated my log with a contact record, cross-checked my sensor readings one final time, and noted in the supplemental field, in plain language, which survey auxiliaries are not encouraged to use, that the exactorate's maps have been correct in every measurement and wrong in every conclusion. The void between stars was not empty. It was just that, until now, we had been the only ones looking.